I don't understand why people who clearly know better are trying to muddy this comet into an alien vessel of some kind. Dude, you know it's a comet. Loeb knows it's a comet. Are you getting paid? These sorts of comments, unfortunately, are far too common on my 3i Atlas video. Now, granted, they are very much in the minority. The vast majority of the people who watch my channel are extremely supportive of what I'm trying to do, but nevertheless, this is the sort of thing I hear a great deal, and I can understand why people are treating my theories about 3i Atlas with a healthy amount of skepticism and, well, an unhealthy amount of rude behavior. And this is because the vast majority of astronomers, really Avi Loeb is the only respected astronomer who's saying anything different. The vast majority of astronomers are saying that this is definitely a comet. At most, they will say that it might be an extremely unusual comet, and we should expect that because interstellar objects are going to be different than objects that we discover within the solar system, but it's still a comet, and why do you keep talking all of this nonsense? And even people who might support me might wonder, why are these people wrong? Why would a trained astronomer, an educated person, or a whole bunch of trained astronomers be wrong about a topic, whereas an obnoxious YouTuber happens to be right? Really doesn't make a great deal of sense, and if it were me watching this content, I'd be pretty skeptical too, and I would also ask that very question. How can you possibly know more than all of these people who have dedicated their lives and studied very hard in college to thoroughly understand the discipline of astronomy? Well, here's the reality. A reality that's manifested itself a couple of times on my channel now. In some cases, if you're more open-minded than the scientific community, you can discover alternatives to the prevailing theory, to the dominant paradigm that actually turn out to be correct. And on two different occasions, I put forward theories about astronomical events that were big in the news at the time. And it turned out a few months later that even the mainstream scientific community ended up agreeing with me once more information became apparent. Education and knowledge counts for a whole lot, but if it is not tempered with an open mind, sometimes you can miss extremely obvious things. Good morning, viewers, and welcome to another episode of The Angry Astronaut. Going to be revisiting 3i Atlas, but not really in the same way as I've done in other videos. I'm sure that after watching a number of my videos on this topic, examining my content, etc., regardless of how much sense it might make to you, a lot of you are probably wondering, and I certainly see this in the comments, as to how could I possibly be right about all of this and so many educated astronomers be wrong. Granted, we have people like Avi Loeb, but a few people who have co-authored papers with him who have explored the possibility of 3i Atlas being something other than a comet and focusing a great deal on the anomalous qualities of 3i Atlas, of which there are very many. Lots of things about this comet that really even other astronomers who believe that this is still a comet acknowledge still very different, very unusual about this object, and it differs from any other comet that we have seen, assuming that this actually is a comet. So how can I possibly be right about this when the vast majority of the astronomical community says otherwise? Well, it's because this has actually happened before. Now, I'm not going to argue that somehow I'm more clever, more intelligent, more educated somehow, something like that, than all of these experts. No, not even close. They know more about astronomy than I ever will. What I am, however, is more open-minded, more willing to explore alternatives based on other studies that have been carried out on the same topic, not just with 3i Atlas, but with other things. And in two particular occasions, I've expressed controversial or not so popular viewpoints about other topics in astronomy and ended up being right. In one case, I was looking at the situation with the asteroid Apophis and its possibility of impacting the Earth at the end of this decade. Currently, NASA has ruled out the possibility of Apophis ever hitting the Earth, even though it's going to come extremely close, closer than some of our satellites come to our planet. It's going to make a very close pass. As a matter of fact, this is going to be the closest pass, the closest approach of any large asteroid to our planet in recorded human history. There are, of course, other asteroids that we haven't detected, we are unaware of, that might theoretically have come closer, but of all the near-Earth asteroids that we are aware of, Apophis, the end of this decade, is going to come closer than any of those asteroids to an impact with our planet. It is an historic event in the history of astronomy. Thousands and thousands of years of recorded human history, and only now is that happening. All that being the case, though, NASA is completely ruling out this possibility. And based on their understanding of Apophis's current trajectory, they've examined it in great detail, and they are very, very confident that there's not going to be an impact. All that having been said, though, I expressed concerns about this, saying, well, how do we know that Apophis is not going to have an impact with a much smaller asteroid that we are unaware of? Just a small rock might impact this object enough, just shift its course a little bit and put it back on a collision course with our planet, or even a near miss of an asteroid, a smaller asteroid, once again, that we are unaware of. The gravitational influence of that asteroid might be enough to shift Apophis's trajectory to where it's back on a collision course. And this is something we dare not play with. And interestingly enough, a prominent astronomer, after I released a couple of videos on the topic, decided to investigate the possibility of Apophis impacting smaller objects during its course around the sun, during its orbit, and discovered that it is actually going to be passing through the debris of a comet, of a passing comet. Now, granted, the odds of impacting small objects and those impacts pushing Apophis back onto a collision course are vanishingly small, but after examining the problem in detail, it was determined that there was a larger chance. It actually doubled the possibility of Apophis impacting our planet as a result of this potential event. The potential of Apophis experiencing something during its path around the sun that would put it back on a collision course. And again, I had brought this up before anybody in the professional astronomical community suggested it. Again, this is not because I was clever. This was because I had read other material about the topic and discovered that this was something that could indeed happen, that asteroids' orbits are not an unchanging thing. So anyway, that was sort of an example of how I was arguing certain points that the astronomical community wasn't to be proven right eventually, but there was one other incident in particular about another asteroid that was very, very clear. While the astronomical community was saying that this object, which might hit the moon, was presenting no threat whatsoever to human civilization. At first, we thought this asteroid might be on a collision course with Earth. It was determined that that was definitely not the case, but that a possible impact with the moon might be coming up very soon. And again, I was reading in most of the astronomical periodicals of the time that nobody was concerned about this, that a big impact on the moon would give us an opportunity to learn more about how craters are formed on the moon. But I had known about a study that was carried out about 20 years ago that explored this very possibility, and the potential threat of a lunar impact was a lot more serious than anybody was saying. I released a video about the topic, and a few months later, the astronomical community changed their position. The asteroid in question is 2024 YR4. Discovered in 2024, as its name would suggest, it's not a particularly enormous asteroid, but still big enough to create a sizable blast upon impact, and also the potential to dig quite a deep crater. For a while, it seemed that there was an increasing possibility that this object was going to collide with Earth, but then eventually, as NASA learned more about its trajectory, it became clear that there was virtually no chance that this object would hit the Earth, and I happen to agree with that assessment for the most part. Again, there's no way to be certain that this object isn't going to encounter another asteroid that might deflect it, or even with its gravitational influence, change its trajectory slightly to put it back on a collision course, but still, overall, this object is probably not going to pass close enough to the Earth to where even a slight change in its trajectory is going to make a difference. The big deal about this object is the fact that it's fairly likely to hit the moon. And by fairly likely, we're only talking 4% here, but in the world of astronomy, in the world of extremely infrequent major collisions between bodies in the solar system, that's a pretty big possibility. But for a considerable amount of time, when this possibility became apparent, astronomers were very excited about it. The March 28, 2025 article of New Scientist had this to say: astronomers have used the James Webb Space Telescope to observe asteroid 2024 YR4, which earlier this year seemed to be at risk of hitting Earth in 2032. Earth is now safe, but astronomers are cheering on a possible collision with the moon. And this is not the only example. An April 14th article in Futura Sciences had this to say, quote, "The moon is regularly hit by thousands of impacts, and it has already survived far worse collisions than the one anticipated with 2024 YR4. What astronomers are most excited about is the opportunity to witness this event in real time. It would be their first chance to study how an asteroid forms a lunar crater, something they've never been able to observe before with the known asteroid." However, during this time, I was talking very differently about this possible impact. And why? Well, it's because one of my viewers had asked months ago what might happen if the asteroid Apophis were to hit the moon. And I discovered a paper written by a graduate student at the University of Arizona over 20 years ago that examined that very possibility. And the reason that possibility was examined is because for a long time it was thought that during the Middle Ages a massive impact on the moon had taken place, digging a very visible crater on the lunar surface. In 1178, a group of monks reported observing a flash taking place on the limb of the moon, roughly in the location where the Giordano Bruno crater exists today. However, if this had happened, a huge amount of lunar debris would have been blasted away from the moon's relatively weak gravitational influence and would have created the mother of all meteor storms on our planet. And this didn't happen. There's no evidence from any astronomers of the time, from Chinese astronomers to European astronomers during the Middle Ages, recording any sort of meteor storm taking place in the immediate aftermath of this bright flash that was observed on the limb of the moon. Therefore, it was concluded that this event had never actually taken place, that whatever this flash was that appeared to take place on the moon must have been something else. However, something began to occur to me. If a massive meteor storm would have taken place with that impact, might it happen today? Would that meteor storm endanger anybody on the ground? Definitely not. Our atmosphere would protect us. However, it wouldn't protect our satellite network. On April 9th of this year, I released a video entitled "If 2024 YR4 Asteroid Hits the Moon, very bad things are going to happen, and no one seems to care. And I was immediately accused of clickbaiting and fear-mongering, while the astronomical community said that everything was going to be fine. My comment section was loaded with things like this. They, I assume that means astronomers, said that if it hit the moon, nothing would happen, and if you know more than the people who actually study these things, which your video doesn't, then just go away. I'm not sure what my video actually knows, but in any event, you get the idea. And the comments got worse. Hello, Mr. Trying to make a controversial internet podcast show. Large asteroids hit the moon all the time, and we're still here. So if things that are that bad are going to happen, how come we haven't been wiped out? I think it's probably worse if it hits us. Total clickbait. But, of course, what these people didn't realize is that other astronomers were actually starting to look into this possibility. And interestingly enough, the very same astronomer who investigated my Apophis scenario investigated this one as well. I am utterly convinced that this guy watches my channel. The primary researcher was Dr. Paul Weigert and also F.J. Lopes and D.J. Brown, and the title of the paper was, quote, "The Potential Danger to Satellites Due to Ejecta from a 2032 Lunar Impact by Asteroid 2024 YR4. The paper determined impact's energy release would be comparable to a large nuclear explosion, equivalent to about 6.5 megatons of TNT. Now, this won't change the moon's trajectory or orbit or anything like that, but it could liberate up to 100 million kilograms of lunar material, with a substantial portion of that being pulled towards the Earth once it escapes the moon's relatively weak gravity. And that's a hell of a lot of lunar material, a lot of debris plunging towards our satellite network. And these are the types of articles that were written in June, shortly after this paper came out, and more than 2 months after I released my video. City killer asteroid 2024 YR4 could shower Earth with bullet-like meteors if it hits the moon in 2032. New simulations reveal that the infamous city killer asteroid 2024 YR4 could shower Earth with bullet-like debris if it hits the moon in 7 years' time, potentially triggering an eye-catching meteor shower and endangering the satellites that orbit our planet. 2024 YR4 is a potentially hazardous asteroid measuring 60 meters across, making it large enough to wipe out a large urban area if it were to hit the Earth head-on. It was first discovered in December of 2024, but made headlines earlier this year when scientists first predicted that there was a chance it could smash into the Earth on December 22nd, 2032. But in April, researchers realized while Earth is no longer in the firing line, the space rock could still hit the moon. The odds of such a collision have grown slowly but steadily, and most recently jumped to 4.3% earlier this month, that is to say early in June. In this new study, uploaded June 12th, researchers ran computer simulations to model what a lunar impact might look like. The team estimated that 100 million kilograms of material would be ejected from the lunar surface, and if 2024 YR4 hits the Earth-facing side of the moon, which is roughly a 50-50 chance, up to 10% of this debris could be pulled in by Earth's gravity over the following days. 2024 YR4 would be the largest space rock to hit the moon in at least 5,000 years, according to Paul Weigert. It is unlikely that any of the potential debris fragments will pose a risk to people on the planet's surface, but instead we may be treated to a spectacular meteor shower as wayward fragments of rock burn up in Earth's atmosphere, which could last for several days and be seen by people across the globe. Does all of this sound familiar to you? Yes, because it's exactly the same thing that was was put forward in a paper that was written about this topic 20 years ago. But while we will almost certainly be safe on the ground from any potential lunar meteor shower, our space-based infrastructure could be under threat. The amount of debris that could potentially be pulled close to Earth makes it around 1,000 times more likely that our satellites could be struck by a meteor. And by 2032, the number of spacecraft orbiting our planet is expected to rise significantly. A centimeter-sized rock traveling at tens of thousands of meters per second is a lot like a bullet, Weigert said. Such an object could easily take out a satellite or cause critical damage to human-inhabited space stations, such as China's Tiangong Space Station and the ISS. These are all exactly the same things that I said in my video about the topic more than 2 months before. So why am I telling you all of this? Is this to prove, look how clever I am compared to all of these narrow-minded scientists? Well, no. I'm trying to make a point regarding the amount of danger that people put themselves in when they propose anything that breaks with the dominant scientific paradigm. Even if we're talking about something as simple as the potential danger that an asteroid could represent to our civilization, these kinds of things come under fire on a regular basis and put somebody's career in jeopardy if they happen to be engaged in the entire discipline. In other words, a professional astronomer making suggestions that other astronomers don't want to hear is actually putting his career on the line. All I'm doing is risking a few trolls telling me that I'm clickbaiting or that I should stop posting videos. But for an astronomer to say something bold is the same as an astronomer risking his job in this type of climate. And this is much more apparent when we're talking about 3I Atlas. Nobody is going to suggest anything unconventional about this object, given the potential threat that it represents to their respectability and to their future career as an astronomer. Only extremely respected astronomers like Avi Loeb, who are already tenured and respected members of the Harvard community, those people can say what they like, but 99% of astronomers are not nearly so free to talk. And so there may be quite a number of astronomers out there who support what Avi Loeb has to say, or at least want to explore alternatives when it comes to 3I Atlas, but they're never going to do it because of how razor-brained our scientific community has become. So once again, I am not trying to argue that I'm somehow more clever, somehow more well-educated, somehow more well-informed than the astronomical community about these topics that they have studied so hard for all of these years. As I say, I can't even pretend to know as much about astronomy as these people do. However, what I do have is an open mind and a logical mind, and sometimes certain possibilities just occur to me. And if these possibilities are worth pursuing, in my view, I will look for a study that might have been carried out maybe even in the distant past to see whether or not my concerns might be well-founded. And interestingly enough, sometimes they are. And when they are, I make videos about it, damn it. And I am going to continue making videos about 3I Atlas as well, because this object is demonstrating all kinds of anomalous characteristics that we would be foolish to ignore. And until we have a thorough understanding of what makes 3I Atlas so different, so unusual, so unique, and really, when it comes to its trajectory, so similar to what an artificial object might be doing, we need to ask these questions, we need to discuss it, and especially, we need to be open-minded. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm sorry it's been a while since my last video was released. My channel was briefly demonetized, a horrific experience, not as a result of anything I did. I didn't break any YouTube regulations whatsoever, but an organization that I was partnered with, apparently a lot of the channels that they were partnered with got shut down for some reason. And so for a while, I was demonetized and wondering if I was going to be facing financial ruin. And so, unfortunately, even though the experience did cost me some money, at least YouTube did manage to fix the issue and restore my channel to good standing, which it is right now. Really happy about that, so expect more content from me in the future as I continue my journey around Australia. If you want to support this journey and support my work, all the details are in the description, along with a lot of exclusive benefits that come to Patreon supporters. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.